A new clock has been set and is ticking in the Canada-U.S. trade relationship. In 27 days, the U.S. imposes a 50% tariff on a wide range of Canadian goods unless Canada can cut a deal. Prime Minister Mark Carney has just briefed the premiers on his plan for the coming weeks. So are they all on the same page? Danielle Smith is the Premier of Alberta, and she joins me now. Premier Smith, good to see you. It's
Hi, David.
Good to see you in person. You met all day behind closed doors with the Prime Minister, with your colleagues, the other premiers. I mean, where do things stand from your perspective in terms of the strategy Canada has to deal with these latest threats from the United States?
Well, I think everyone's going to be counting down. I think we're on day 27 before the latest round of tariffs would come into effect. And I think you heard the Prime Minister say that there's going to be an intensification of the negotiations. I think what has happened to this point is we got really close to a deal. That's the sense that I get from both the Prime Minister as well as those that I speak with in the United States. We came very close to a deal around October of last year, and for whatever reason, it ended up falling apart. And if we could get back to that really productive conversation about how we can both win from the trade agreement and the trade negotiation, then I think we can make some progress. So this has a clock set. We've been counting down the days, and I hope to see that level of intensity and hopefully a deal. We're emerging in short order.
My colleague Kate McKenna asked the Prime Minister how he viewed this. Is this a true opportunity to get to an agreement, or is this the latest countdown clock on the latest tariff? What's your understanding after getting briefed?
There's no question. I mean, everything else to this point has had a CUSMA carve-out. So all of the agreements that we have and all of the threats that we've had to this point have been, well, only for those goods that are not compliant. That's the reason why Alberta has 97% of our goods crossing the border without tariffs on them. We only have 3% of our economy that is exposed to tariffs. This is quite different because it's going to be applying to those goods that are.
So why does that lack of a CUSMA carve-out tell you that this could be a slightly different thing? What is it? What signal do you take from that?
You know, it's a lot more painful, I think, as well, and it's a lot. It hits a lot more industries, a lot more retailers. I'm already hearing stories from back home about some retailers who've made the decision to close down their shop, and so I think you're going to start seeing that kind of pressure on our side, and I think that there's a real urgency to try to address it to make sure that it doesn't come into effect. Right. I mean, I suppose he could have had it come into effect immediately. The fact that he didn't suggests to me that he wants to force us to the table, and I think that there's a framework for an agreement. If you look at what was being talked about last year, selling substantially more oil to the United States, having a uranium deal, selling critical minerals, those are the kind of things that I think if we can put those on the table, we might end up getting to a very productive trade agreement and addressing some of the other sectoral issues that have been a source of irritation.
I know there was some public talk by some premiers that they wanted to see a strategy or a plan from the Prime Minister today on how they plan to approach it. I know it's not smart to lay out the details of your strategy in public, and the Prime Minister certainly did not do that in anything he said in his press conference. But were you given a sense that there is a clear strategy here, and what is your comfort level with what they told you on that?
Well, I think he's been quite clear about his strategy. The Americans have perceived us as being weak. I mean, you hear it. They think that our economy will collapse if we don't come to an agreement. And I think what the Prime Minister has spent the last year and a bit doing is setting up new trade negotiations, new trade partnerships. He's got 20 additional trade relationships that represent a market of 3 billion people. And every time I meet with a new ambassador, they know who Canada is. They know what we have to offer. And they know, especially whether it's energy or critical minerals or food products, they know those are the kind of products they want. So that goes into a negotiation from a position of strength. It gives us optionality. And I think that he's worked hard to do that, and mentioned that the premiers have as well. I think collectively we've all gone to over 100 different trade missions in the last year and a half. And so I think that going into those negotiations with strength, saying, hey, we have things other people want. Sure. And bringing it to the table, saying we'd like to work a deal with you because it makes sense for both of us, I think that's a good starting point for a negotiation.
So you think the aggressive travel agenda and attempts at trade diversification the Prime Minister has engaged in has been worth it, has been valuable?
Very successful. We can already see it. I mean, before, especially before Trans Mountain opened, we didn't have any understanding or awareness, I think, in the Asian countries about what we had to offer. Now, every leader or ambassador of one of the Asian countries is saying, hey, we know you have energy. Whatever you can sell us, we'll take it. And by the way, those countries who are energy secure are also food insecure. Right. And so that's why it creates, I think, a real opportunity for all of our goods.
Right. So that trade diversification strategy sort of stacked on top of the domestic development strategy. Yes, the Prime Minister has been clear, at least in the big picture on that, but that is to build resilience against the United States. I think today some people were looking for a strategy on how to deal with the United States, or at least deal with this latest issue with the United States. Did you get a sense that there is a strategy and a plan on that issue?
Well, I think they're the same thing, really. I mean, we know what the world needs. We know what even businesses in the United States need. We know what the advantage we have from proximity. We have a number of American business leaders and also congressional leaders and other elected leaders who are advocates for us, and it's working. When you look at the United States and level of support for different Trump policies, the least level of support is for tariffs against Canada. That tells you something.
Right. So I wonder too, Premier, as they do these negotiations, part of the conversation was the Prime Minister saying that his goal is to get a comprehensive deal, not a piecemeal deal, to get something that is more comprehensive and deals with everything all at once so this doesn't persist. He was asked why he was so positive on that, and he made a point saying, I didn't say I was positive. I said that's my goal. And that's been the question I've been asking for the last couple of days about this is, how confident should we be that the Americans, at least the American administration, wants a comprehensive deal? Because it has been a pattern so far of finding a pressure point, finding a weakness, hitting it, and applying leverage. And a comprehensive deal sort of takes away their ability to hit as many areas all at once. What's your view there?
Well, I think that we have a lot of things that have been on the table before, and we don't want to just say, yeah, we've got an energy deal, or yeah, we've got a critical minerals deal, and leave out softwood lumber and auto parts and steel and aluminum. I think that's what we're talking about with the comprehensive deal, is that there have been things that have progressed in the past. They got stalled. And so if we're going to come to an agreement that's going to make sure that every part of our country benefits and every province benefits and all of the sectoral issues are dealt with, I don't think that can be done piecemeal.
But do you think the U.S. wants that? Because, like, I understand, but Canada would want that, and why we would want it, and make it our goal, but it takes two, right? And so far, at least one of us haven't been that cooperative.
I like the Prime Minister's strategy because he tried a few things. I mean, we allowed liquor back on the shelves in Alberta and Saskatchewan. There has also been a relenting on the digital services tax. There were initial tariffs to prevent Chinese dumping of steel and aluminum into our market. And so there have been concessions that the Prime Minister has made, and it hasn't brought the U.S. to the table. So I think what I would have observed is now he's saying, okay, well, there are obviously things that they want us to resolve, but if we're going to resolve them, then we have to have some parity, some fairness. They've got to be resolved. Some things have to be resolved on our side, too. So I think it's a good strategy. Will it work? I guess we've got 27 days to find out. Okay, so if at the end of that 27 days we find out it didn't work, the Prime Minister has been asked about what he would consider in terms of retaliation. I know this has been some of the conversation, certainly in your meetings the last couple of days. There is, I would suggest, and if I'm wrong on this, feel free to correct me, there's the Doug Ford approach, and then I would say there's the Danielle Smith Scott Moe approach as the two different poles of this, where Ford wants to use everything you can to hammer him. Yours seems to be a little bit more diplomatic, or favoring diplomacy over retaliation. We'll get into that in a second, but what do you take from what the Prime Minister says when he says everything is on the table? Because everything to me includes oil, potash, electricity, critical minerals, all of it. How do you interpret what he had to say? I don't think it's very constructive to go into a negotiation saying or else, right? I mean, I think everybody is trying to get him to find out what the or else is, and I don't think you go into a negotiation promising to punch someone in the nose. You go into a negotiation talking about a win-win, and I think that that's more the Prime Minister's style, and I'm glad to see that. What I would say is you have to be very careful not to put things on the table that you're not prepared to do. And I'm going to try to prevent Canada from making a very dumb decision of putting energy on the table, because Line 5 goes through Michigan. If you cut off energy to the United States, they can cut off Line 5 and cut off energy to Ontario and Quebec. So no aviation fuel, no diesel, no gasoline, and we don't want to do that. So I would just say that it may sound tough to say those kind of things, but if you cannot do it practically and you're not prepared to live with the consequences of doing it, don't threaten it. And so there may be other things that with the passage of time that will come up, but I would say it's far more constructive to go into negotiations saying, hey, we want a deal, we want to maintain this really strong trade relationship, and let's see if we can both get a win out of it. That's my approach, and I think that's the Prime Minister's approach.
Right. I mean, the difference between maybe doing something that's cathartic and doing something that's strategic, right? But then how do you get the leverage against the United States? Because while Canada may want a win-win, I don't yet have a sense if that's what the United States wants. I mean, the justification for these new tariffs was you haven't taken your retaliatory tariffs away. The quickest way to get rid of a retaliatory tariff is to stop attacking, and then the retaliation goes away. So how do you, if you're not prepared to use potash and oil and critical minerals, and I'm not saying we should because I know what it would do to your economy and the political dynamic in Alberta, how do you get the leverage if you know, the mutually beneficial arrangement that has broadly existed isn't enough of an incentive to the Americans?
Well, I can tell you what we do. I mean, we've hosted literally hundreds of legislators in Alberta in the last month, with the Penmore meetings, with the state legislators meetings, with Stampede, and every single one of them are friends and champions. And we're talking to those who are in positions of political power, who have constituencies, who know how strong the trade relationship is. They become our best advocate. So that's been my approach. But the leverage comes from having a diverse market base to sell to. And that's been the big transformation in the last 18 months, is we finally have a point where we are genuinely supporting each other and genuinely open to finding market access for all of our products.
Is that leverage or is that durability, right? Because we can resist it, but we can't force them by being more diverse and more self-sufficient.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose there's a limited amount of capital out there. And so if you're going to build capital projects that go east and west, is there also going to be enough money to build capital projects that will go south as well? If you line up different trade agreements so that you have the product that you're producing is already committed to go to some other place for 10 or 20 or 30 years, then it kind of precludes you from having it go another place over that period of time. So time is of the essence, and making sure that we have the opportunity to do trade with 20 other nations in the world. I would say that does create a sense of urgency. I know that the Americans are also looking for all of those same products. Of course, they could get it from anywhere else, but it makes the most sense to get it from your closest trading partner.
Okay, so just last question. I mean, how are you feeling about the overall state of play as you leave here? I mean, based on what we heard today and based on what you've heard from the United States, do you feel more confident that a resolution to this is at hand, or is it still who the heck knows? Because that's been the reality for the past year and a bit.
I just think it was an interesting way that the latest round was announced. The fact that it has a time frame on it, it does seem like that is designed to try to focus everybody's efforts on trying to get some negotiations started. We've been hearing that things are further progressed with Mexico. Last time around, remember, Mexico and the U.S., they inked a deal. And then they said, hey, you better give us some concessions, otherwise you're going to be left out. So the fact that we're watching how they're progressing with Mexico, the fact that they've created this stop clock or time clock, I think that those two things suggest that it's time to get serious. And I'm glad to hear that the Prime Minister intends to do that.
Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, always appreciate
You
the
bet.
time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
David.